Welcome back to session 2 on assessment centres. Hope you found the first session informative, and it's setting the scene for you gaining knowledge about what employers are looking for. The next session that Anna's going to deliver is all about assessment centres and the interview aspect of it. So over to you, Anna.
Brilliant, thanks Jackie. So as I said, we've done an overview on some of the testing elements. So this is a little bit about the types of interviews that the assessment centre might involve, but also a little bit about some of the other types of activities you might be asked to do. So yeah, just a reminder, this is about how people are recruiting using assessment centres. So I guess the key for me in this session is that there are a number of different types of interviews. So what that means is the types of questions that the interviewers will ask you can be structured quite differently. So we will try and demystify that a little bit for you in this session. I'm also going to do a little overview on some of the other types of assessments that employers use in assessment centres, again, to try and understand a little bit more about your behaviours and how you respond in different situations. So we like our assessment centre slides. It just gives you a little bit of overview of all the different elements. So
yeah, I mean, obviously we now, if you could, let us know how we can prepare for the interviews, that would be really, really useful.
Yeah, of course. So I think that, again, the key for me, and I mentioned this in session 1, there's an important element here of understanding a little bit about what it is you've applied for. So if you know a little bit about the organisation, you can do research on the internet these days. There's usually a wealth of information on companies' websites. That'll include a bit about the type of organisation they are, a bit about what their culture feels like. But again, for me, you do need to understand a little bit about the job that you've gone for. So again, there might be a job description you should have a look at, or an advert that tells you a bit about the role. And again, that might have some information in it about the organisation too. But there's a little bit of something as well about thinking through perhaps, or being prepared for some of those key questions. You're generally going to be asked things like what your strengths are and those kind of areas. So just to have a think a little bit about what you enjoy, that's a good sort of basis and a good start point to prepare yourself for an assessment centre. So just jumping back to the slides, there are lots of different types of interviews. We'll go through a few examples with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about strengths-based interviews and competency-based interviews. We'll also cover a bit about values and behaviours in session 3. But again, values-based questions are something that a lot of employers are using now, again, because it helps them to understand fit of new candidates for their business. When you're thinking about going into an interview situation, there is a really helpful sort of little acronym that you can remember, which is to try and remember CAR. So this just helps you frame the answers to your questions. So if you have in your mind, what was the situation, what was the context, what was going on, what action did you take? So in finding a solution to a problem, how did you go about it? What steps did you take? And then you've obviously got an ability to then say, so what happened? What was the outcome? What was the result? Might not always have gone to plan when you're giving an example, but it's good to be able to chat that through. And that structure of CAR will give the interviewer a sense of perhaps what your involvement was in the issue or the problem and how you tackled it. So it helps them with things like decision making, what your thought processes are. So it's a good little framework, that one, to help you through interview. So moving on now then, here's a couple of examples of types of interview questions that you might face. So a strength-based question. These are questions that are designed to find out a little bit about your interests and what your key strengths are. So they might sound a little bit odd, but actually things like what you do in your spare time, what energises you, how would your close friends describe you? They are questions that really tell an interviewer a bit more about you, about what makes you tick. So again, this is about understanding you. And, a really good example here. So if what you like to do in your spare time is play football or play netball or, something that's really very team focused, what that tells the interviewer is that, you enjoy working with others, that whole, there might be a little element of competition in there, but it tells the interviewer that, you do enjoy working with other people. On the other hand, if you were to say you like to read, or you like art, you like to paint, you like to colour, you like to draw, that's a much more independent activity. So that might tell the interviewer that actually you like some space and time on your own. They're not bad, they just tell the interviewer about what's important and a little bit about what makes you tick as well. The final of those, and again, these are just examples, but the question about do you like starting tasks or finishing them? What that's helping the interviewer understand is, are you a completer finisher, or are you an ideas person? So if you like starting tasks, there's something probably really motivating for you about, kind of the start of a process or the start of a project. If you like finishing them, there's probably a focus for you on that completer finisher element. So you like to tie up loose ends, you like to have a clear end point. So again, you have to trust the interviewer in as much as they are asking these questions, because they are really trying to find some information out about you. Competency-based questions, a little bit different, but this is doing is asking you to give an example of something that's happened in the past, because what we often say is past behaviour is the best predictor of future behaviour. So if somebody says to you, can you tell me about a time when you worked in a team and delivered a project? So that'll tell them, one, that you've worked in a team, and two, that you've worked on a project. But then you might just say, actually, I find it really exciting when I'm the one who's able to plan and keep everybody else in line. Well, that's a good strength, and you're talking a little bit about the role that you take. Another example of those questions can just be, can you give me an example of when, or describe a time when? They are just different ways of asking a similar sort of question. They might say something to you like, have you ever been in a situation where a team has fallen out, or you've had an argument with somebody in the workplace, or at college, or at school, or any situation? And what, again, they're trying to understand is a little bit about your responses in those situations. So just make sure you listen to the question, and it's absolutely fine to ask for them to re-explain something, or to say it again, or to break it down if the question doesn't feel clear to you. Okay.
Yeah. How many people are likely to be interviewed by?
It's a good question, actually, Jackie, because it can vary. My background's HR, and I would always say that good practice is for it to be a minimum of 2 people. What that enables is for somebody to listen and somebody to write down some notes. There are occasions where it would just be one person interviewing, but equally, for some different roles where they're perhaps trying to understand a little bit about your fit with the team, and then some technical questions, they might have some other people on the interview panel who can ask specific questions. So for example, if it was an apprenticeship scheme, you might have an engineer on the panel who can sort of explore a little bit about, your technical interests. And you then might have somebody who can ask questions about your, how you tend to work with others, how you tend to communicate. So you'll get a feel for the types of questions people are going to ask you. But again, it's absolutely fine if anything confuses you or you're not clear. Just take yourself a little bit of time, think through, and don't feel as if you've got to jump in with the answer straight away. So just as a recap then, so we've got a bit of an example there. So can you tell me a time when you did something, which is an example of a competency-based interview question. But what I would say to you is you generally find there is a clear structure that the interviewer will follow. There tends to be one type of interview question. They don't generally mess around and mix that sort of style up, because that will confuse the interviewers as much as it would confuse you as the interviewee. But also what they might do, just to kind of ease you into an interview, is to start by using some what we call opening questions. And then as they get into the interview a little bit further, they might ask a few probing, or we call deep dive questions, just to understand a little bit more and to sort of unpick your first answer. So I'll give you a couple of examples of those as well, hopefully to help you. So good opening questions. As I say, this can help you relax a little bit at the start of the interview. So there might be things like, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've applied for the role or the scheme or whatever it is that you've expressed an interest in. Sometimes I'll ask you to chat through your CV or your application form, or if you've completed a supporting statement, they might just ask you to talk through that. And then again, a useful question is, how does this role fit into your longer term career plans? Now, you might not have thought about your long term career plans, so I guess that might be a useful bit of prep in terms of, you know, if it's an apprenticeship, then it often means it's leading to, you know, a career aspiration that you have. So think about, you know, perhaps you've thought, oh, you'd like to do a technical role for a few years, and then you might like to team lead or something like that. So you can sort of think that through in terms of how it feels for you. Probing questions are sometimes used if you answer a question but your response is perhaps a little bit limited and they want to understand a little bit more. So you might answer a question and the panel might say, so how did that make you feel? Or what was your response? They might ask you to chat through how it impacted, something that happened, how that impacted on those around you. And then particularly if something went really well or something didn't go so well, they might say to you, so what would you do differently next time? And what that does is help them understand that you've got that sort of lateral thinking ability to say, well, actually, we didn't manage to do that piece of work because we hadn't got anyone who could finish it, or nobody had the right skills. So you might say, well, make sure next time we've got the people who can do it. So there are, you know, I say these are just a little bit about that interview panel or that individual being able to just explore in a little bit more detail what some of your answers might mean.
Anna, what happens if you feel as though you don't know the answer?
The honest question, the honest answer to that is be honest. If it's a question, an opening question, you'll be fine because that is about you. Probing questions can sometimes be a little bit more complex, but if it's a technical question, for example, and you genuinely don't know the answer, be honest. The worst thing sometimes you can do is to babble on and try and answer a question, knowing in your mind that you're not getting it right. And the trouble is with that, Jackie, is it actually tends to knock your nerves even more than saying, I'm really not sure of the answer. If it's more about needing the question reframing a little bit, then say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. Would you be able to explain what you mean? The interviewers will be able to do that, and they will be able to help and demystify. So don't be afraid, just take a few seconds, think about the question, and then if you're not sure, it's absolutely fine to say, I'm really not sure I know the answer. They would much prefer you were honest, and that tells them a lot about you and your style as well.